20,000 people, trapped underground in complete darkness. Not in some remote bunker. In Moscow metro tunnels. Russia's capital, November 2024. 43 trains frozen in place. Emergency crews evacuating commuters with flashlights. Traffic lights dead across 12 regions. The Russian capital paralyzed. This wasn't a natural disaster. It was Ukraine's largest coordinated drone offensive yet. 700 drones. 5 power stations destroyed in one night. Critical fuel pipelines burning. And the Ukrainian drone commander's message to Moscow? Get used to it. Dark winter is coming. This is how the war just changed. The assault began after midnight on what Russians would remember as their Halloween blackout. Ukrainian drone swarms penetrated Moscow's air defense perimeter. An estimated 700 to 800 strike drones executed simultaneously across multiple vectors. Target priority: energy infrastructure. Power generation facilities supplying Moscow and 11 surrounding regions went offline within hours. The cascading failures hit the Moscow metro system hardest. 43 subway trains carrying 20,000 passengers stopped dead in tunnels beneath the city. No power, no lights, no communication systems. Fire brigade teams descended into darkness to evacuate thousands using handheld lamps and emergency protocols. Above ground, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Traffic management systems failed. Intersections without functioning signals created gridlock. Businesses lost electricity mid-operation. Office towers went dark. Moscow hadn't experienced disruption at this scale since the war's beginning. And Ukrainian officials made clear this was deliberate retaliation. Days earlier, Russian strikes killed 15 Ukrainian civilians and wounded 20 more. President Zelensky promised proportional response. But Ukraine didn't target Russian civilians. It targeted the infrastructure sustaining Putin's war machine. Russian state media scrambled to explain the blackouts. Initial reports blamed technical failures, then maintenance issues. Finally, after citizen videos showed drones illuminating the night sky moments before detonations, the Kremlin acknowledged drone activity but downplayed the damage. The evidence told a different story. While Moscow's blackout dominated headlines, Ukraine simultaneously struck military logistics infrastructure most Western outlets overlooked. The Druzhba oil pipeline network became a priority target. This system consists of 3 major pipeline corridors transporting jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline from Russian refineries to military depots. Millions of tons of fuel flow through these lines monthly. Russian defensive measures proved inadequate. Crews had installed anti-drone netting over vulnerable sections. Armed guards patrolled critical junctions. Electronic warfare systems attempted to jam drone guidance. None prevented Ukrainian drones from reaching their targets and detonating payloads directly on pipeline infrastructure. Multiple fires erupted along pipeline segments following the strikes. Satellite imagery confirmed significant damage. The attacks demonstrated that Russia's rear area, previously considered secure from Ukrainian reach, no longer offered sanctuary. Ukrainian planners identified choke points in Russia's fuel distribution network and exploited them systematically. Every successful strike compounds logistical pressure on Russian military operations, forcing longer supply routes and consuming scarce transport capacity. The strategic calculus is straightforward. Russia maintains roughly 34 major refineries across its territory. Most were constructed using Western technology and components. International sanctions now severely restrict access to replacement parts. Every drone strike causing refinery damage creates repair timelines stretching months instead of weeks. Russian engineers must locate alternative suppliers, navigate black markets, or attempt improvised fixes with substandard components. Ukrainian sources estimate these recent operations took approximately 5,000 megawatts offline. That represents enough generation capacity to power between 1 and 5 million homes. Industrial facilities and military installations consume substantial portions, but the grid destabilization affects all sectors. Russia has demonstrated repair capability, often restoring damaged facilities within 2 to 3 weeks. However, the frequency of Ukrainian attacks now exceeds Russian repair capacity. Engineers face impossible choices about which facilities to prioritize. When they complete repairs on one target, another strike often follows within days. This isn't about single devastating blows. It's attrition warfare applied to infrastructure. Hours after the Moscow blackout, Ukraine's drone forces commander issued a statement timed for maximum psychological impact. Russian citizens were still without power. Metro passengers had just emerged from dark tunnels. His message, blackout is not scary. It's an inconvenience. Get used to it. He compared Ukrainian drones to unpredictable birds, impossible to track or stop. Then mockingly, torches, flashlights, candles, dark winter. The taunt wasn't empty bravado. Within hours, Ukraine launched another massive operation validating the threat. 5 additional power stations across Russian territory and occupied Ukrainian regions took hits in a single night. Kursk Oblast reported 16,000 residents without electricity after substation destruction. Lipetsk witnessed multiple explosions. Luhansk experienced strikes severe enough that even Moscow-installed administrators couldn't dismiss them as drone debris. Video documentation from Russian civilians showed drones crossing night skies before detonations. The footage contradicted official Kremlin narratives. These were deliberate, coordinated strikes achieving intended effects. This campaign represents a fundamental shift in Ukrainian operational doctrine. For 2 years, Ukraine fought primarily defensive operations within its borders. Now it's executing sustained offensive operations deep into Russian territory, targeting strategic infrastructure with indigenous weapons systems. Ukrainian drone technology has evolved dramatically since 2022. Early models were commercial quadcopters adapted for military use with limited range. Current generation drones feature longer range, larger payloads, better navigation systems, and enhanced countermeasure resistance. More importantly, Ukraine domestically produces these systems. That eliminates dependence on foreign suppliers subject to political pressure. Production facilities operate inside Ukraine despite Russian bombardment, churning out hundreds of drones monthly. The operational tempo is staggering. Ukrainian forces now conduct near-nightly drone operations against Russian targets. The 700 to 800 drone figure from the Moscow attack represents the largest single operation, but smaller strikes involving dozens to hundreds of drones occur almost daily. Russian air defenses, despite heavy investment, cannot intercept all threats. Ukraine launches hundreds of low-cost drones. Russia must achieve near-perfect interception rates with expensive missiles. When 10% of drones penetrate defenses, they still inflict significant damage. For Russian citizens, particularly Muscovites who believe themselves insulated from war consequences, these attacks deliver uncomfortable reality. The conflict they supported or tolerated now manifests as darkened streets and cold apartments. Ukraine's campaign extends beyond drones. Cruise missile capabilities are expanding rapidly through domestic development programs. President Zelensky recently confirmed deployment of Paleonitsia cruise missiles in at least 9 operations. This domestically developed system significantly enhances Ukrainian long-range strike capacity. Mass production begins before year's end according to official statements. The strategic implications are profound. Ukraine reduces dependence on Western-supplied weapons subject to political constraints. Indigenous systems operate under Ukrainian control exclusively. Kyiv decides targets, timing, and operational parameters without foreign approval. Recent strikes demonstrate this growing capability. On Halloween night, Ukrainian naval forces employed Neptune missiles against the Ural thermal power plant. Neptune, originally designed as an anti-ship cruise missile, has been adapted for land attack missions. The regional Russian governor initially claimed drone debris caused the explosion. Video evidence contradicted that narrative. Local residents familiar with drone strikes noted the distinction immediately. This explosion sounded more powerful, more destructive. The Ukrainian Navy subsequently confirmed Neptune missile employment. This weapon diversification creates complications for Russian defense planning. Air defense systems optimized against drones may struggle against cruise missiles. Conversely, systems designed for cruise missile interception might be overwhelmed by drone swarms. Ukraine forces Russia to defend against multiple threat vectors simultaneously. The combination of mass drone attacks and precision missile strikes establishes a sustainable asymmetric warfare model. Ukraine doesn't need to match Russian military power conventionally. It needs to inflict sufficient damage on Russian rear areas to impose unsustainable costs. This strategy is working. Russian logistics are increasingly strained. Energy infrastructure degradation affects both military operations and civilian morale. Putin's government must divert resources toward infrastructure defense and repair instead of offensive operations. Winter amplifies these effects. Temperature drops increase energy demand for heating. Damaged power generation and fuel distribution systems struggle to meet consumption needs. Blackouts become more frequent and prolonged. Ukrainian officials openly promise a dark winter for Russia. Current operational tempo suggests they possess both capability and determination to deliver on that threat. The question is whether Russia can adapt defensive measures and repair capacity faster than Ukraine can destroy infrastructure. Present indicators suggest Russia is losing that race. Repair timelines extend. Replacement parts become scarcer. Domestic morale shows strain as war consequences reach ordinary citizens in Moscow and other major cities. The approaching winter creates a strategic calculation both sides understand clearly. Ukraine possesses demonstrated capability to strike Russian energy infrastructure repeatedly. Domestic drone and missile production continues despite Russian bombardment. Russia faces compounding problems. Infrastructure damage accumulates faster than repairs complete. Sanctions restrict access to critical replacement components. The mathematical equation increasingly favors Ukraine in this infrastructure war. As long as Ukrainian production exceeds Russian interception rates, and Ukrainian strike frequency exceeds Russian repair capacity, the energy system degrades progressively. For ordinary Russians, particularly in major cities, this manifests as declining quality of life. Blackouts become routine rather than exceptional. Heating becomes unreliable. Economic activity suffers as businesses operate with disrupted power. Public frustration grows. Putin's government built legitimacy partially on delivering stability and improved living standards. Sustained infrastructure failures undermine that narrative. The war that propaganda portrayed as distant and victorious now reaches Russian homes in tangible, uncomfortable ways. 20,000 people trapped in darkness beneath Moscow. That image crystallizes how dramatically this war has shifted. For 2 years, Ukraine absorbed Russian bombardment while fighting defensively. Now it strikes deep into Russian territory, targeting infrastructure sustaining Putin's war machine. And it does so with weapons built in Ukrainian factories, eliminating dependence on foreign approval. The drone commander's warning wasn't rhetoric. Dark winter is becoming Russian reality. 700 drones in one night. 5 power stations destroyed. Critical fuel pipelines burning. And Ukrainian officials promise this is just the beginning. Russia faces an uncomfortable equation. Can it repair infrastructure faster than Ukraine destroys it? Current evidence suggests no. Damage accumulates. Repair backlogs extend. Sanctions choke replacement parts access. Winter amplifies energy demand while capacity degrades. Meanwhile, Ukraine's strike capability grows. Domestic drone production scales up. Cruise missile development continues. The asymmetric advantage is real and expanding. For Putin, whose strategy relied on exhausting Ukrainian endurance through attrition, the balance may finally be shifting. Russian citizens in Moscow and other major cities now experience war consequences directly. Darkened streets, cold apartments, daily disruptions. The conflict is no longer distant. This campaign is psychological warfare as much as military operations. Each blackout undermines Russian confidence in state protection. Each strike shatters the security illusion Putin's propaganda depends on. The coming months will determine if Ukraine can sustain this pressure through winter. If so, Russia enters spring with degraded energy infrastructure, strained logistics, and declining domestic morale. That changes the entire strategic picture heading into 2025. Hit subscribe for daily Ukraine war analysis and military breakdowns. This is the strategic front. The war is evolving. We're tracking every development.